again, talking about the pro-Palestine UK rallies, which are taking place across the country. And we've seen images of one in London, even though one wasn't organised for London, and certainly no permissions were given. It's a static protest, so anyone can gather, right? You don't, they're not marching, so they don't need permission, which I think is a bit bonkers. It's the same thing, isn't it? But anyway, we are now talking to Will Geddes from the ICP group. Will, it has been a while.
It has been, Petrie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Will, just before we get on to the pro-Palestine marches, I just want to ask you about that with foreign aid, because I know your business is all over the world, right? And we work in security all over the world and have done for many years. I mean, you look very young, but, you know, that belies a very long career. But it is a case, isn't it, that a lot of the money that we send in foreign aid is not used in the way it was meant to.
No, and that's very normal. Unfortunately, there are many countries which are what we would call developing or emerging, and all too often, sadly, in many of those countries, the endemic political system or the individuals that are the ruling party of that particular country may divert cash in other ways than to necessarily the people and what it was intended for. Many companies these days, I've advised and dug a few companies out of problems in the past in various parts of the world where they have been involved in perhaps some sort of financial incentive for contracts or for the assistance in certain situations. And in many countries, that kind of passing of money is seen as something culturally accepted. So the problem is that when you have foreign aid, which obviously is donated to certain countries, culturally, they may not necessarily see too much of a problem in diverting some of that to their own back pockets or to elsewhere, for that matter.
Or to weapons buying. I mean, this is the other thing, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. I mean, and again, it could be fortifying their positions for a variety of reasons, some good, some bad. It really does depend on the country. But certainly companies aren't able to do as they used to. We have the Anti-Bribery Act here in the UK, which is very stringent and very quick to prosecute any companies that are involved. And in the United States, you have the FCPA, or the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which has been in place for many years. And again, sadly, the same applies to US companies.
Yeah, but sadly, that doesn't apply to governments.
Well, exactly.
Those acts don't apply to governments, and most of the money and listen, foreign aid it's been well known as brown envelope stuff for decades, right? Nobody's under any illusion that it isn't just here's a wad of cash. Can we do business with you? You know, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we smooth the visa process? Whatever it is, whatever the processes are. So but those rules don't apply to government, and it's government really that is taking our taxpayers' money and using it in that way.
Yes, and I would agree with you on that. I think there has to be some sort of audit or checks and balance, probably undertaken by a independent and impartial third party that can actually see where this money is ending up and place on those governments an accountability to, again, provide sufficient data. And, you know, I've been involved in investigations overseas where I've gone in to see where money has gone in certain circumstances, particularly from companies that have been investing into charitable organisations. And when we found that money has been diverted elsewhere, then obviously that tap is turned off. Now it's down to that charity, it is unfortunate because obviously if it is for charity, then it is ideally going for good. But again, you've got to look at those that are controlling the purse strings, and if they're getting this money, what are they doing with it? And they have to be responsible to make sure that it is for the purpose intended.
And finally, on this issue, is it really that difficult to manage where the money goes? Because, you know, you mentioned those laws. You know, I a year ago sold a property and bought one. I can't tell you how many times I had to go through fraud checks. You know, it's kind of like, well, why you're not checking the Russian oligarchs, are you? When they're just well, you know, clearly not. Or Chinese money coming in, or corrupt money being swished around London. That's fine. But so it can't be that difficult, surely, to check it.
I would agree, Petrie. I don't think it should be that difficult. Again, we as private citizens will, as you rightly say, go through a variety of
Ridiculous.
KYC, compliance checks, and other, if you like, boundaries to make sure that our money, if we want to take a pile of cash into a bank, for example, if it's over £10,000,
Yeah, can't do it without.
we're going to be in big trouble.
Yeah. But I mean, but it seems again, if you're a Russian oligarch with several suitcases full of the stuff, nobody notices.
Well, here in the United Kingdom, they would. That's for sure, certainly with the sanctions in place now. But there are parts of the world, Turkey, the UAE, various other countries, where you can walk in with a bucket load of cash and very few checks and questions will be asked.
Well, that's where I'm going to have to take my bucket loads of cash then, Will. I mean, as simple as that. Stuff my suitcases and go somewhere else. Will, let's get back to
Absolutely. I'll help you carry them, Petrie.
That's very kind. I might need some security. The rallies that are taking place, now currently they're taking place across the country. We're set to see another big one in London this week, next weekend. Depending on who you speak to, 300,000 or 800,000 people turned up. I mean, that's quite a big difference. What do you make of the security implications of these marches going ahead?
Well, there are huge implications, Petrie. Obviously, we saw during Armistice Day and Remembrance Weekend, we saw members of far-right groups, some well-intended, some less well-intended, that obviously clashed with Palestinian protesters. I think people are getting a little bit sick and tired of seeing protesters desecrating and certainly abusing monuments, and the police being fairly soft-handed about how they're approaching particularly the pro-Palestine supporters. I'm all for the benefits that we have and the liberties we have in this country for free speech, but I think it has to be done respectfully. So again, it's a question of the police invoking and utilising the laws that we have in place already to ensure that it's policed appropriately, but also the safety of all can be maintained.
Now, as we chat, of course, there is more bombing going on. There are more people dying. There is more anger towards what is happening from both sides. It's a hugely emotive topic. Could we see that anger turn into something else on Britain's streets?
Yes, I think we can. I think we have to bear in mind that, unfortunately, people will be and continue to be volatile, particularly in instances where this conflict is continuing. So the best that can happen is for this conflict to be ended as soon as possible.
I think the roundabout way, I'm asking, you work in security, I know you talk to people at all sorts of levels. Are people concerned about any terror activity?
Okay, well, to put it bluntly, yes, and I think we all are. There are those individuals that could use the wave of sentiment right now of what's going on between Israel and Palestine to surf that wave into potential terrorist activities. I think it really comes down to our government, what their stance is on it, how they couch, obviously, a very delicate situation between both groups. And also, as I've always been saying, Petrie, within the media since this conflict started, there are three parties involved here. There's Israel, there's Palestine, and there's Hamas.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important to realise that regardless of which side you may be on, you should all be against Hamas.
That seems to be the thing. But like you said, the language gets conflated, doesn't it? And it gets conflated not only by some media, but also by some marchers, and that is what's causing a big. We're talking about bad players here. We're not talking about the good people who are marching for peace. Everybody wants peace. Nobody's talking about them. The vast majority of whom are decent people who are upset about family members or even just upset about humanity. So just to make that very clear, but there are bad players. There are people who are intent on causing trouble anyway, and this just adds fuel to their fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, it's the few that tarnish the whole, or if you like, the majority. So, you know, as with any protest, and I've been involved in the security around a number of protests historically for a variety of different agendas. But one of the things that we should be looking for, or certainly the authorities should be looking for, is good interaction and good dialogue and communication with the protest organisers and with the general protesters themselves, that they can weed out and identify those that are the bad actors, those that are there to simply spoil it, ruin it for everybody, and potentially tarnish the good intentions or agendas that they're protesting for. So, we all have a responsibility, and it doesn't mean they need to interact or intercede themselves. It could be simply flagging to a uniform officer that there are individuals within the group, within proximity to them, who evidently are looking to obviously cause much more disruption.
It has to be said, though, doesn't it, Will, that actually the bad actors last weekend were the far right, those who were protesting against the protest.
Well, again, I always say in every conflict, the first casualty is always the truth. There has been a lot of coverage. Coverage will cover, obviously, the more accelerated or amplified situations. Yes, there were probably bad actors, and there inevitably were bad actors from the far right who turned up who had only intentions of violence. Yeah. But likewise, one could say the same with the other side. It's whatever garnishes the most publicity, sort of in terms of its viewing effect to the audience, that various mainstream media have obviously utilised to the fore. talkTV, I have to say, has been incredibly balanced in its coverage. And I think we have to maintain that. And so, one doesn't vindicate any one particular side, but one also does appreciate from an impartial and balanced view that there will be bad actors on both sides.
And as far as these rallies and marches go on, that's the other thing, isn't it? It's the tolerance levels of the British public who are not engaged in these rallies and marches. We're starting to see it with the Just Stop Oil people who really do disastrously affect the lives of people in London specifically, and that the public now are starting to get really angry with them and to turning against them, and it always terrifies me because I just think we're one step away from what happened in Colombia, where a guy, when met with Just Stop Oil protesters, shot one dead. This is also a real push-pull situation, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot to unpack from what you've just said, Petrie. I mean, the first of which is, at which point does the promotion or the protest of a particular agenda start becoming counterproductive? And I, as a Londoner as well, know the inconvenience that is caused when you do have this huge attendance that is moving across London and then impedes everybody else getting about their everyday work and their life. So, it's a case of, what are these protesters seeking to achieve? Are they seeking to sway or persuade the government to put adequate pressure on Israel or on Palestine, or in whichever agenda it might be? It could be in oil. And at which point does that actually work for us universally? Because if you really upset the masses are probably more likely to turn against you, as we've seen with Just Stop Oil. Yeah. Just Stop Oil, I think, I'm going to want to go out and buy lots of oil-related products. Then again, I probably don't need to, because most of the things that I have generally are anyway. Yeah,
you're a bit of a petrol head, aren't you, to be fair?
Yeah, maybe.
I say that with love. Obviously, I do say that with love. Will, it's been a joy and a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.